Hello, everybody, and welcome to Breaking Story with Young Screenwriters. I'm Alexie, and today I have a special guest here with me, Theo.
Hi. How's
So,
everybody today?
fabulous. I am fabulous. I don't know if that's everybody, but I am.
We'll assume.
And today we are talking about season 6 of Black Mirror, which Theo and I both checked out and had a lot of thoughts about. Really enjoyed some parts, had some critiques about others. So to begin, Theo, I'm wondering which was your favorite episode?
I want to say, I'm going to say this for what they tried, and I'm going to say episode 3
Interesting. Okay.
because I really respected that they went for it. I respect that.
Mhm. I can see that. For me, it was like 3 was strong. I'll get to my more in-depth opinion on it. I have some notes for 3, but I gotta say I'm a fan of 1, which I feel
One
like
was
is
great.
this which I feel like is like the safe answer. Pretty sure they put it first because they knew that this was a knockout. They're just like, yeah, we know we did well here, so let's put it first. Um, but yeah, let's get into it. And I will say that there are going to be some spoilers ahead because we're going to be breaking down the different points of the episodes and kind of looking at what makes them tick, and maybe we can take away into our own stuff. So, Theo, do we want to start with episode 3? That one was Beyond the Sea. Um,
Yeah, let's start with it. I was interested in this one, I think, because you had told me beforehand, before I watched it, that you did not enjoy it. And
yep.
so I went into it thinking, okay, maybe this is going to be a train wreck. So I was actually very pleasantly surprised because I I thought it was going to be horrific. But I really was like, I really enjoyed it. I think that, um, if for anyone who hasn't watched, it's this very compelling story about these two astronauts who are living in these proxy robotic bodies on Earth that they plug into at the end of the night. And people know who they are. They're very famous for being, the guys. People recognize them on the street. And one of the astronauts' bodies is destroyed. And so, through working with his partner and his wife, he starts using his partner's body, his skin, to enjoy life on Earth a little bit during that time. And I thought that was like ridiculously compelling
Yeah.
for me. It really felt like a Philip K. Dick or a Ray Bradbury short story brought to life, which is, I mean, that tickles me inside. So I think that's why it worked so well for me.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think that for me it was I I can't say I love the setup because the setup is freaking brutal, but it was a phenomenal setup. I will say. So when there's these two astronauts, Cliff and David, and I believe which one it is David who has like a perfect family back on Earth, right?
Yeah.
And then when he leaves his body for a little bit to go do emergency work on the ship and wakes back up, there's a home invasion situation. And essentially it is the worst case scenario you can wake up back into of these cult people who do horrible things, and there's nothing he can do about it to save his family. And it is brutal. And I was just sitting there the whole time like, holy crap. It was like the concept was already really cool because I love that sci-fi stuff of they're up in space, they're in the spaceship, but they still get to enjoy life on Earth. So it's like, okay, I need time to go to work. I'm gonna get out of my clone body and go back to the ship. But then this was just like, oh, I did not see that twist. Um, and
Yeah, it
the
was a pleasant surprise from not a pleasant
pleasant,
surprise, but like narratively, I was like,
yeah.
oh.
I was like, dang, okay, we're gonna go there. Whew. And that was really intense. And then you naturally kind of you're like, how are we gonna go on from here? And then they propose the thing of, well, this guy's David's body was destroyed on Earth. So he's just gonna have to sit in the space station alone for the next 4 years of this 6 year stint. So Cliff is basically like, why don't you borrow my body and you can come hang out at my house in the country and take an hour break every now and then. And
Do you know what I think is an important part of this, though, is that David is struggling with the isolation at this point.
Right.
And Cliff is very specifically says to his wife, I don't know, like, if we do not let him do this, he may kill himself, unalive himself, and then the entire thing is done. We're dead. We're all dead. And that, I think, was a really pivotal detail of
Yes.
It's almost like this emotional manipulation of, if we don't do what he says, we will die.
Yeah. Absolutely. Those stakes were so strong because like Theo was saying, it's a 2-person little space station. So David is now horribly, horribly depressed and is debating suicide. Cliff walks in on him for a moment when he's about to throw himself out of the airlock. And if he does that, then Cliff is screwed too. He can't get back. He might have like a duplicate body on Earth, but if his body in space dies, there's nothing to send back to Earth. Like, he's done. So they are put into the situation where they, because of extreme circumstances, choose to let this person occupy his clone on Earth, which is so, like, how do you get someone to the point where they're willing to let you live in their body with their wife and child for an hour a week? Like, what extreme would you have to go to be willing to do that? And that was so compelling. So I was in love with this episode all through that. And then I think, Theo, this is where our like own personal taste kind of diverges, because then this one is like an hour and a half long.
Hour 20, yeah.
Yeah, it's essentially a film. And that happens, it's sort of the break into Act 2, right? Because now we're going to go into a new world, I would say.
Yeah.
And then it's him coming into Cliff. David is going into Cliff's body once a week and kind of being with his family and painting. And I was like, what is this guy going to do? Is he going to kill the cults? Like, is he going to do something? And like, is this going to get more intense? And it became the love drama, right? The like, but I'm sure you can talk a little bit about that, because I feel like you were into that.
I was very interested in it because immediately, as soon as he went into his body, I had this, and they had a kind of a mild flirtation, I thought. And the thing about what they did, and this is what I really enjoyed, is that David is all of the things emotionally that Cliff is not. Like, Cliff is he's not emotionally connected. He's not grounded. He's not really there for his wife in the way that she needs. But David is. He reads books. He recommends books for her that she likes. He's artistic. He's all of these things. I got the sense that in her point of view, if David stayed somehow and they didn't know, she wouldn't mind so badly. Because here's the man she loves in the body that she knows and has married to, but now he has the mind of the man of her dreams. And what does this mean? And is it cheating? Is it really adultery if it's with the body of the man that you love? I just thought that was so interesting. What do you go in your mind to justify that? And I think they have this moment, they get to a moment where it's just about to happen, and she has kind of like her come to Jesus moment and says, no, we cannot do this.
Which was a good twist that was a good choice in my opinion. I
thought they were going to do it.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought they were going to go fully, they were going to go for it. But there was that really interesting moment where he was like, clearly there's all this sexual tension between us. Like, let's go. And she is very line in the sand. Absolutely not. And that surprised me, because I feel like in a lot of these, it would be the opposite choice. They would go for it and then it would blow up. But that was again a really cool choice. I think the only part of this that I really ever objected to was just how long it took in between when he went into her body to when the big blow up happens at the end. Like, I felt
Did you know how long it was?
It just felt really long.
No, but like going in, did you know that episode was an hour and 20 minutes?
No.
Because I did. I knew it was a movie. So I went in knowing this is a film.
Yeah.
or it's very nearly film length. So for me, I was very prepared. But I think if I had gone in expecting a 45-minute episode and gotten something that was double, I would have gotten frustrated.
That could very well have been a big part of it, because at some point I was just like, this is a lot of slow burn, and I wanna see the action. Like, I want to get into it now. But in true Black Mirror form, the ending just completely whips everything back around, is a hot mess in a good way. Um, oh, this is interesting. So Jim here commented, said the writer said that the story was inspired by the lockdown and COVID and how isolation destroys our humanity.
I can see that parallel.
Absolutely. And so much of these episodes in this season in particular were really like
on the nose.
Yeah. Looking at the ways that modern society is messed up in a really cool way. And I didn't know this, Theo, maybe you knew it, but the name Black Mirror, do you know the origins of what that's about?
I don't remember, to be honest. I'm sure I've read about it.
Yeah. It's the Black Mirror is what happens like when you turn off your TV screen and
oh, right, and you see yourself.
Yeah. And so it's like this, it's the reflection, like the distorted reflection of the world that we see.
Right.
And that's the vibe
seeing
of
yourself see. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is horrible, by the way. Terrible. Unflattering Black Mirror. I would prefer never to see that Black Mirror. But
I enjoy it.
You love it?
I'm like, damn.
You're like, wow.
Like this shows my good side.
Theo is the only one who has that experience. I will put that out there.
But I just had a thought about kind of that pivotal moment where she says no to him, because I did find that very interesting, because I thought she was going to be into it. But there was this moment that I thought was really well written, where in the beginning of the episode, they show David with his wife having a little intimate moment, and he has this very specific thing that he does. He like kisses her neck, and then he like cups, her body in a very specific way. And then he does the exact same action with her, with the wife. He mirrors that, and it's that moment that she says no. And I think what happens for her is that she's in this experience, and then she feels this touch in her husband's body that is not his touch, and it freaks her out, which I think it would for anybody. And I think that's the moment where she says, you know what, like this whole time I've been willing to suspend reality and pretend that this machine is my husband and / human. And now I can't pretend anymore. And I think that's an interesting conflict for her.
And that's the moment where she says, you're wearing my husband's body like a suit, right? So, which is such a good line. And yeah, I agree. It's the moment where this is now confronting her. It was much more, I guess, approachable from a distance. But we also saw that Cliff with her was very closed off anyway. Like he was not he was not really crossing that physical boundary with her. He was very clearly uncomfortable for a variety of reasons with touch in this body. Like in the very beginning, we saw him chopping wood, and he was really struggling with it. This is not his body. And I will say, Carl told me the one issue was, why wouldn't you send your replica into space?
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Though that being said, if there was some kind of malfunction, the whole thing is out the window.
Yeah, I was thinking possibly it was the coordination, that maybe that's what they were trying to get at with the chopping wood.
That's very true.
But it was still like, you know what? Stop ruining this for me. Stop it. Don't come at me with your logic.
You have to suspend your disbelief just a little bit to be like, because you can logic your way out of just about anything, and it makes things unenjoyable. But I think it's our responsibility when we're watching media, especially media like this, to go in with kind of an open mind and say, okay, I'm in. Take me for a ride. Don't make me regret this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that how much do we want to say about how this ends? I'm trying to.
I think let's just be coy about it and say that it is a very ironic moment, and everything comes full circle, and it's horrific.
Yes. Very intense. Oh, there's Carl saying, LOL, called out. Yes, you are. You were very called out. Why wouldn't they just put the replicas in space? why don't you stop ruining my show? You know, like,
Exactly. Come on.
God.
You know, that's, you know why? Because he's scared that he's going to get replicated by a guy who doesn't ruin science fiction
That's true.
shows.
Somebody will be in his body and just will say, "Wow, let's just go with it.
They'd be like, wow.
I'll be like, who is this?
And do I mind?
And do I mind?
You know what I would do? Here's what I would do. I would love to see a version of this story from her point of view. And maybe not this specific scenario, but I would love to see a story where someone is confronted. The story I would write would be a woman who is confronted with her piece of crap husband, good for nothing guy, and all of a sudden there's like this kind and caring and nurturing and artistic soul in his body. That's a conundrum I'm very interested in, and I would love to see from a more frontal point of view.
You know what's also interesting is, in my mind, how this would change if the astronauts were women and if the time period were not the 60s, because, or like late 60s, early 70s. It's like, it's very much two men who are experiencing this, right? And it's very
in the 60s.
In the 60s, in this like particularly like masculine environment where they're the two like buff astronauts in space who have to like take care of things. It would have been really cool to see a version of this that's more modern with women, or even just the 1969 version where we're already in an alternate history where the astronauts are women and how they would handle this situation.
It would be different. It would be very different, I think.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the immediate thing that would happen would be that husband that's on Earth would be like, oh, how can I get away with this? Mm-hmm. That's me generalizing, but let's just say for the sake of the story, this guy's a scumbag. And he's like, oh, I get to be with my wife, but I can be with someone else at the same time, win-win. I think the motivation would be very different in that story.
Yeah. I also think that just really leaning into the specific moment in masculinity that 1969 is, and that, you know, and that what that moment was more for women. I feel like part of the reason why this was allowed to happen and allowed to get as bad as it did is because those two men are not communicating. Yes. Like, they are not talking about their feelings. This guy is completely shut down, understandably so. But they need to talk about this. And the lack of talking about it is what causes a lot of the issues. And that is definitely exacerbated by the fact that it's 1969 and two astronaut men who are, you know, most astronauts are military. It's a very, like, traditionally macho world.
Rah.
Yes. But I think for me, the only part that I love the setup. The ending was really interesting. The middle kind of lost me. I really wanted him to I wanted David to be flirting with the wife so that she would let him use her husband's body to go get the cult people. I really thought that it was going to be a twist, that like we think that he's actually into her and that this is just like romantic. But then like when they're about to have this moment of tension, he's like, so can I have the car? Like, you know, and
I think there's a version of the story. I think that's a version of the story. And I think that the reason they set them in such widely different, and maybe why this was also not modern day, because if they said, how do we stop him from following his very obvious want, put him in California and him in New Hampshire or wherever he is, and also make it in the 60s where there's no airplane or not like regular commercial flights that he can easily access. That I feel like was done on purpose to say, okay, we're going to set up some obstacles here that make that impossible. But you're right, that is the immediate motivation that the majority of people would have. Although, you know, maybe at this point he's like, you know,
what's the point?
He's caught in this nihilistic kind of thing. What would that do if he accidentally, you know, ruined Cliff's body in the process? That would also be a bad thing.
I think that something that comes through in all of my favorite Black Mirror episodes is a super strong twist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's true of a lot of short films, and is definitely true of the ones that I think work best from season 6 in general. Is a really, really strong twist.
Set
Do
up
we?
payoff.
Yes, exactly. And all of these, I believe all of season 6 was written by Charlie Brooker.
Yes, I think the last episode was co-written.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure. I think another one might have been, the last episode was co-written. But
Bisha K. Ali.
yeah,
Mhm.
and I'm not sure if she was also the lead actress. I didn't check the credits because I watched it quickly.
Mm.
But it's very interesting. Honestly, it's impressive that he's writing all of this. Like, his resume as a writer, his portfolio is much deeper than the majority of writers, because he's
Yeah.
written 6 seasons, in some of these, and there's always a movie length episode in almost in every season. There was the White Christmas episode, and then Bandersnatch was a whole thing. It's very impressive. I don't know if it's the best thing for the series going forward, because I think it would be very difficult for any writer and very stressful to put yourself through not just writing one thing every year, but I'm going to write 6 movies.
Yeah, it's like I assumed going into this that Charlie Brooker was the showrunner, but not necessarily the writer of each episode, and that he was having different writers come in with their own ideas for each episode. And there is like a writer's room involved. It is more than just him, but it is his stuff. It is his like ideas. It is his writing at the end of the day. He gets the written by credits on these at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that's a lot.
It's a lot.
I feel like going forward, I would love to see what other writers could do in this space.
Everyone has a Black Mirror idea,
Mhm.
and that would be so interesting, because everybody's Black Mirror idea would be so different and so unique. And I think that would be an interesting place for them to kind of push forward in the future.
Yeah. Here's a quick question about the structure of episode 3. Jim says, do you think the inciting incident was when the family died or when Cliff gives him the body? I'm curious because the family dying is so disconnected from the rest of the story. I think my gut instinct on that is that the family dying is the inciting incident, but giving the body is the call to action and the break into
I
act
agree.
two. So the family dying is the thing that happens to our protagonist. Then there's the response, which is that he is going to, at this point, I would say that who's even the protagonist of this? That's kind of complicated.
I don't think it's traditional, but I think if we're looking at this, I think both of them probably have an arc, because this changes both of their worlds, right? The inciting incident, his family dies, but also it's not just that his family dies, it's that his skin suit is destroyed. So for David, this means that not only is his life on Earth basically over, but he is stuck in space. And for Cliff, it means that his partner is A, stuck in space, and B, spiraling into, what could potentially kill both of them. So really, they both have this arc that is incredibly reliant. Like, I understand like what you're saying, where you feel that it's disconnected from the rest of the story, but I really felt like that was the moment of going from this perfect golden life that he's living to now he's lost everything in a minute and he cannot go back. And that's the really important distinction of a good inciting incident, in my opinion, is that you cannot go back to the way it was before.
Yeah, exactly. So David's inciting incident is definitely that like his whole family is killed in front of him and that his body is destroyed. So now he's stuck. His response is that moment in the airlock when he's debating suicide. He's not sure what to do. He doesn't see a way forward. And then his call to action, his break into act 2 is that Cliff has offered him his body for an hour and he accepts. So then when he enters Cliff's body back on Earth and goes and like explores the woods, that's his new world. He's now exploring the new world of I'm going to be on Earth through Cliff's body with Cliff's family in these woods. For if you were going to look at it from Cliff's point of view, it's almost exactly the same, but just, changing who it's related to. So the inciting incident, something that happens to him, is that he is now in extreme jeopardy because his partner had a tragedy happen to him. And if his partner succumbs to this, then Cliff will also lose everything. Like, Cliff is in jeopardy of putting kind of his family in a similar position that David is in right now by him dying in this situation and leaving his family alone. So it's either way you cut it, though, the inciting incident is what happens with the family, and then the break into Act 2 is either offering the body or accepting the body.
Yeah.
Wild. And then it definitely, the family issue comes into play again much more strongly at the end. So the twist at the end is very much tied to that setup at the beginning, and all those pieces have to happen for it to work. So that's why I feel like it's not that disconnected once you go through and you say, like, okay, well, where are we going to end up?
The symmetry is there. They mapped out, okay, the symmetry very much works, which I always appreciate that. That makes me feel good. Generally, the reason, if I don't like something, it's almost always because they've set something up that they haven't paid off, or they have something that they haven't set up. I find that very aggravating. I don't really know why.
Well, because it's just like, you want it to feel like they respected all of your time, and that if they told you something at the beginning, that it's going to matter later, and that you paid attention for a reason. And it's a really rewarding feeling to get to the end and be like, okay, they did set this up. Like, I see that they weren't leading me astray in this. But that episode is really strong. I don't hate it, but I got first off, it stressed me the F out.
It was stressful.
Which is like to be expected, but I was very stressed. And so I did not love that detail. The family dynamics also just really stressed me out. And then I was a little bored in the middle, I mean. But overall, it was an excellent setup. And it posed such an interesting question of, like, what would it take to let another man live in your body with your family?
Mm-hmm.
Jeez, it's a lot. Do we want to take a look at some of the other episodes? I know we probably can't get into depth quite as deep into the other ones, but I think that they're still worth talking about.
Joan is Awful, I think, is a good place to go to, because I think there was definitely a reason they put that episode first, because it was their strongest Black Mirror-esque episode. And the thing with Black Mirror, Alexie is not an acolyte necessarily. I've watched every single episode of Black Mirror. And I find that I usually love about half of the episodes. There's like 2 or 3 episodes every season that I'm like, yes, this is fantastic, loved it. And then there's a few episodes where I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't hit me the same way. But Joan is Awful, I found kind of riveting from start to finish. And it was funny and it was fresh. Like, I loved it. I loved all the actors. They did such a great job.
I thought it was Annie Murphy killed it. Loved it. I enjoyed a lot of like what Salma Hayek brought to it. Adam and I had a little bit of a discussion about it. And he's like, you can tell how much of this was like her notes specifically. And which is just, it's very true, but I still really enjoyed it.
But it also plays into, it's not only just like super relevant for what's going on right now with the strike and with AI and all of these things, but it's those kinds of things are like, yes, this is exactly what an actor would have input into. And I think it's really an important thing for screenwriters to also take into account that, like, yes, you're going to be working probably with the director, you're going to be working with the writer's room, you're going to be working with all those people, and you're going to be working with actors who are so dedicated to their craft and also their image. And they have certain things and certain character traits that they want to portray and don't want to portray. And those things may have to change. And that was a very interesting way of showcasing what happens when an actor has power and when an actor doesn't have power, or when a human doesn't have power.
No, for sure. So to give a quick rundown of what this episode was episode 1, also by Charlie Booker, directed by Ali Hanku. And basically, there's this woman named Joan who's played by Annie Murphy in more ways than one, but for now, woman named Joan, played by Annie Murphy. And she is a tech CEO, and she has a really difficult day at work where she has to let somebody go who's very emotional about this moment. She has like a difficult day at work. She goes to therapy. She has a little moment with an ex over text where she ends up meeting him. They kiss for a second. She's like, I can't do that. Like, no, stop it. Goes back home to her husband, who she like complained about in therapy. We know things aren't necessarily great, but they're still together and making it work. They sit down at the end of the day, turn on their Netflix, which is Streamberry, and lo and behold, there's a show on there queued up called Joan is Awful. And it is Selma Hayek, but her hair looks exactly like Joan's. It's got like the white in the front and then the black. And they start watching Joan is Awful. And it is a dramatic interpretation of her entire day from start to finish, where they make her look even more awful than she was. Every moment that she had to make a choice, her character makes a slightly crappier choice or much crappier choice throughout the day. And so sitting next to her, the boyfriend sees like how she vented about him in therapy and how she met up with the ex and how she so meanly let this girl go at work and like didn't care about her feelings. And her character is played by Selma Hayek. So that's the setup. And basically her life is starting to get destroyed because everybody around her is watching Joan is Awful and seeing the things that she does. And it forces you to think about like, oh my God, what if someone made Alexie is awful, which is, ties into where it's going to go. But that's the setup. And then basically it's ruining her entire life. She's losing her job because technically now she's given away corporate secrets. It's all going downhill. And so she is trying to figure out, how can I sue them? Nope, because she signed all of her rights away when she signed up for Netflix.
Terms and conditions.
Terms and conditions. She's like, can I talk to Selma Hayek, who's playing my character? And they're like, nope, because that's not even Selma Hayek. This is all AI. Selma Hayek sold her like rights for us to use a deep fake of her in this portrayal of you. So now Joan has to try to figure out, how do I get this production shut down?
And the great thing is that they have this scene, this scene within a scene moment where this is happening to Salma Hayek as Joan, and Cate Blanchett is playing her.
Yep. Because
deeper and deeper and deeper.
Because in the show, Joan is Awful, Selma Hayek's character eventually reaches the point that Joan reached, where she sits down to watch Netflix, and there's a show called Joan is Awful is on her Netflix. So Selma Hayek Joan sees Cate Blanchett Joan, and it's this whole looping mess. And that's where you see that really great moment that they're using in so many of the trailers, where Annie Murphy is like, I know Salma Hayek is very religious. I know that she would not want to be represented this way. I am going to go get explosively sick in a church. And then when her body double deep fake has to do that on screen, she's going to get mad and shut this production down. And it's just so much fun. I loved that episode so much. And basically it's about them two, Selma Hayek and Joan, trying to shut down this Netflix production together and figuring out like all the ways that this is messed up.
On the sly. Because
on the sly.
Salma has no power.
Yep.
That's what I loved that they did in this, because it could have been so easy. There's a rule that I like to think about when I'm doing things, and it's like, it can never be easy. How can you make it harder? And they thought, oh, Salma Hayek is an A-list actress, she's going to have all this power. Nope. No one cares. And also, like, the CEO of Streamberry is a douche. So that really helps.
Yeah. And it's, what I love about it is that it's a really, really scathing indictment of like Netflix and like AI and like the direction that some content could go. But there's so many layers to it, because you also know that Netflix is being striked against right now for being absolute turds and wanting to use AI to write their stuff. So at the same time that they're publishing things that are an indictment on the equivalent of themselves in this show, they're still doing the thing. It just makes the whole thing so meta. Yep. This episode is meta. Like, it is the definition of meta, and I find it really interesting, and it makes you wonder, do I give credit to Netflix for publishing this or not? Like,
right. And there's
like,
no right answer for that.
Yeah.
I don't think. But it's the great thing too is all of the obstacles really wrap into each other really well. Like, it's very much cause and effect. Everything that happens, like, is because of a reaction. Joan, oh no, this is ruining her life. She can't even get sympathy from her ex, because he's like, oh, this is going to be really public, isn't it? So she's got nothing, right? She has nothing. She has to like stoop to the wildest thing to get Salma Hayek's attention. And then, and then they partner up and then go through. Oh yeah. And there's Michael Cera's in there too.
Michael Cera. Yeah. And then, I mean, in true Black Mirror fashion, for the episodes that really work, there's a lot of twists throughout. There's the twist in the middle, like where we realize Salma Hayek's not in on this, and they're going to have to team up together to try to get this thing shut down. And then there's another twist at the end of who Annie Murphy / Joan is in relationship to all this, which I would highly recommend watching. It's really fun. I love that. But it's
it's peak Black Mirror. It's really peak. It reminds me of Nosedive, which is one of my favorite episodes, which is with Bryce Dallas Howard. It's the Instagram episode where the society is completely built on phone ratings and social media, and she really spirals toward the end. So I feel like it has like a very similar feel, and it's exciting.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it ended shockingly positive, and I was so there for it. I know that was one that Adam told. He was like, I hated that it ended good. And I was like, no, I loved it.
Sometimes you need it. Also, Nosedive had a positive ending too, and it's not like, it's kind of bittersweet, right? Yeah. It's not like, oh, we've like totally prevailed. It's like, oh, we've found ourselves in this strange place. Though the dark endings are kind of fun too. I do also enjoy those quite a bit.
Which means that we're gonna have to talk about episode 2 if we're gonna go for the bittersweet
dark ending. Yeah,
it is a bittersweet ending to the end. Holy crap, that one's great. I guess so. As we go into this one, to really take a look at the screenwriting side, why don't we take a sec to think about, as screenwriters, like, what can we take from this? Like, what is it that we can take away from watching Black Mirror and pull into our own writing, or even like our own approach to breaking in, like trying to write our own essential episode of Black Mirror? What do you think that there is to take away?
I think it's one is setup payoff. I think that works really well for Black Mirror, where everything in a good Black Mirror episode, Act 1 and Act 3 are kind of mirror images of one another, pun intended. That works very well. And when you get to the end, a good episode feels satisfying because it's like really completely set up in such a way. And then there's also this element of this, like, the thematic question of a good Black Mirror episode is very strong, right? Like something like Nosedive, you very much end that episode thinking, like, would I buy into the system, or would I find happiness letting it all go? It puts you in a position where you have to ask yourself the question, what would I do if I were in this scenario? And I think that's the strength of Black Mirror. And the best episodes make you ask that question.
I agree with that very strongly. I think that is when the Black Mirror episodes work. I feel like there's a lot of joy in wondering, would you do what they do? And being able to argue both ways. It's a tough one. I feel like for me too, I see a lot of writers who really, really love Black Mirror, and then the good news about it is that it can inspire you, and still you write something completely unique. You can write an episode of Black Mirror that is yours entirely, is completely original, and that you can make and use for things, and use Black Mirror as a comp, and it can help you talk about it, potentially sell it or play it at festivals. If you watch Black Mirror, the part of the benefit of it, especially the shorter episodes, is you're seeing how a really strong short works.
Which is rare.
Yeah, granted they're pretty long shorts, but you still get them. You still get a good sense of how can you tell a self-contained story that is extremely evocative and interesting, and it gives you an opportunity to kind of play in that space. It's a good challenge to ask writers to write their own Black Mirror episode about an issue that is interesting to them.
And the world building, like another great, a great Black Mirror episode. Nobody is ever going to tell you how that world works.
Yeah.
In this, I think it's called the Story of Us. Something's, I know it's longer than that, but it's something, the Story of Us, the one where they have the little marble where they can watch their memories back. Like, no one ever really sits down and says, oh, are you getting your marble fixed because you need to watch your, like there's no exposition. It's all very much, they're partying and they're watching memories, and Buddy's like, I don't want to do this tonight. So you're in it. You're seeing the world and how it works through action instead of exposition. And I think that works very, very well. It's a hard thing to do. You really have to sit there and think, okay, like, how can I show this new mechanic, this new world that I've created, and give the audience everything they need to understand how it works, but not tell them. Like,
yeah.
And the trick is you can't. Like, you have to find a way to say, okay, I'm not allowed to say A, B, or C. How do I show this? And it really is by like showing it in action and by showing it in conflict. Like, as soon as you have the conflict of like what problem this new thing or this world or this, point of view presents to the characters, then the audience is going to get it.
Absolutely. That's a really good point, that what I find Black Mirror to be masterclasses in is attacking with exposition.
Yeah.
There is so much world building that happens in every single episode. And Charlie Booker is so good at never having to take a beat to do a scroll explaining the history of the world. I'm going to say that, then there's going to be a scroll in some episode. Mostly.
I don't think there is. I can't recall of one.
Yeah.
15. Yeah, you're right, Jim. 15 Million Merits is really fantastic with that. That's the one. I don't know if you've seen this one, Alexie, but it's the society all like rides these bikes, and the bikes propel the energy for the building that they live in. But then they also do these like YouTube style shows, and it's phenomenal. And it's oh, I can't remember his name. What's the movie? No. He's in the Get Out. He's in Get Out. Daniel. I can't remember. Anyway, he's phenomenal.
Oh, Kaluuya.
Yeah, Daniel Kaluuya. He's phenomenal in that episode. And it has one of those like really like off-putting endings that really makes you feel like, ha,
oof.
All right. Yeah. Whereas like Hang the DJ, which might be, if it's not my personal favorite beside Nosedive, I love Hang the DJ. That's the one where they date with this special app, and they have to be together for however long the app tells them. It is like, the ending is transcendent, man. Like, I've never felt better between that or like San Junipero.
Oh, I've seen that one. I've seen San Junipero. I think I've seen Hang the DJ. I did a thing where when Black Mirror first came out, it was a long time ago, okay? It was like 2011. I was scared, okay? I tried to watch them, and it was just so intense. And then being at NYU, because, yeah, I was at NYU from 2012 to 2016. Everyone's talking about them nonstop. And I would try to kind of go in and be like, okay, what's this about? Watch a terrifying one. Nope. Done. Can't. But in recent years, I've gotten much better about watching scary stuff, and so I've been going back and watching some. San Junipero was one of the ones that I was like, Google, what are the top ones that I have to watch if I have to like know about Black Mirror? That was one of the ones.
It's a great
It was
one.
great.
That
I
was a
think
really
it was
great one.
National Anthem that I tried to jump. Yeah, that's the first one of season 1. I was like,
That one's
holy
rough.
crap.
That
Yeah.
one is really, and I found it like being not British. I was really confused for a lot of it because I was like, did this happen? Because I remember Googling it, and I think that like there was like that rumor existed in real life or something, and I was like, what in the world am I watching? But thankfully I continued on and found my place with them. But I will tell you that I've watched every episode of Black Mirror, and I can distinctly remember the episodes that I loved, and the episodes that I did not love do not exist in my head at all anymore. Like they just did not retain. So, as much as maybe this is a lesson for all screenwriters, is like you can write the highest highs and you might not be consistent, and that's okay.
And honestly, that people remember your highest highs and that your lowest lows tend to fade to the background, fortunately.
I'm not blaming good old Charlie and saying, oh, I didn't like that episode, you're not good. I'm like, no, you wrote this great episode and that was phenomenal.
No, when I saw freaking National Anthem, I would have been a senior in high school in Kentucky, so confused about the world. Turn this on. Why the pig? Why? Like, what is it? It was not gonna work. It was not meant to be.
That was a hard one. It was. Season 3 was the one that really hit me, where I was like, yeah, I'm really digging this. And I really liked the White Christmas. That was the long featurette. And honestly, we watch it at Christmas all the time, which seems strange, but it was just so compelling. And John Hamm is in it, and I love John Hamm. And like,
he's great.
The conversations and the whole idea of this like prison in your mind thing. And that's the strength of Black Mirror, is when the concept is interesting. This season was kind of neat. I mean, and there have always been episodes of Black Mirror that don't have excellent concepts. And I think that some of the episodes in this season hit that. Like, I enjoyed episode 2, which is kind of, it's really an indictment on our obsession with true crime, and which is a very real thing. And it's it's probably not a great thing that that we have an industry built out of true crime podcasts, but that was an episode that I didn't think necessarily held the same thematic question that makes a Black Mirror episode for me.
Yeah.
It was creepy. It was freaky. It was very much like, wow, this is horrific. But I didn't think, what would I do in this situation? Because I would never be in that situation, right? Like,
no, it was very much like at least with 1 and 3 in particular, there was, and I guess kind of in 5, it puts you in a lot of places where you're like, what would I do here? And in 2, it was more just like 2, it was called Loch Henry. It was the one where there's this couple who goes back to the guy's, I think his name is Davis. His partner is Pia. They go back to Davis's little hometown in Scotland, and they're going to do a film documentary about this man who sells eggs, or like protects eggs or something. I was like, what is going on with this egg man? And basically, as Pia learns about the history of this town and learns that Davis's dad was kind of killed by a serial killer.
Interesting detail to leave out when you're meeting somebody.
Right? Like, and because his dad was a cop who got shot trying to like investigate the serial killer in the town that completely made the town a ghost town. Pia's like, this is what we need to do the story on. You're very close to this. We have like the place where it all happened, these horrific murders of tourists, and let's do a documentary on it. You're kind of like, maybe it's because I'm a screenwriter. I'm like, that is the much more interesting story. Like, objectively, you kind of like,
you have to do it.
You have to. And it was, so there wasn't really a like, would I do it thing. And especially from the point of view of Davis, like it's his family. His family is tied to the story. It's his dad, so it feels like he's not overstepping to shoot this, in my opinion. Pia was, but it was sort of like, I don't necessarily think that Davis is making an outrageous call here. So I didn't feel that pull of like, what would I do in his situation? It's more just
watching it unfold.
Yeah, watching it on that one. Oh boy, would recommend checking that one out. But yeah, you're right. You're absolutely. I hadn't thought about that, but you're absolutely right that it's not the typical Black Mirror question of like, what would I do in this situation? It's more just like turning a mirror to the audience and saying, see how effed up it is that you like this true crime stuff. Like, see how messed up you are.
And like, what are we doing? Like, the question for me in that one was like, at what length will we go to like satiate our intense obsession with this, you know, and showcasing at the end this bar that's full of people and they're celebrating it being on the news, and our poor little Davis is just heartbroken.
Whew, man. The thing I did not like about that one is, to me, it didn't feel like. So the setup is that they change their mind and they're investigating this murder and this serial killer in the town, and they're kind of interviewing people around, and it turns out that first off, these crimes were much more terrible than they fully understood, and second off, that spoiler, that Davis's parents were involved. So it's so intense, but when Pia finds out, she tries to run away and trips and falls and dies. And I was like, that
was a little like, okay.
Yeah, that was.
But you know what, there was a setup for that actually. They did say in the beginning, they were like, oh, there's so many like rocks and rivers out here that people like they go out hiking all the time and they never come back and they just die. So they did set it up, but it wasn't the most satisfying way they could have handled that little loose end.
Yeah,
but I knew the minute I saw the wall of videotapes, I was like, oh, mommy and daddy, that's, you know.
Poor
my husband. Like, my husband is like, probably, he's getting better at it. Like, for a while, I find great joy in like theorizing what has happened, and I'm very happy when I am correct, which is a lot of the time, you know, because we understand story. And for a while, I think it really bothered him, where he was like, can you not do that? But now he does it. Now he's like, oh, and he gets very excited, especially when he calls a line. Like, what I will do very often is I will say the dialogue that I think the character is going to say, and then they say it. And now he's doing it too. So I'm like, see, you're there. You're getting it. He's been listening to coffee class.
You know, that's the same with Carl. Me and Carl will both, like, someone will say something and you're just like, I can't even replicate it right now, but there's some lines where you're just like, yep, this is the only thing that they could possibly say.
Only thing. Yeah, it's usually like a play on like something they've just said. Like, I'm the only one who can do it. Yeah. It's always intense like that, you know?
Yeah, it's like,
it's so good.
It would be like someone said, you're the only one who can do it. And then you say with them, I'm the only one who can. It's just like, you know, it's like and
it's a canon event. I cannot interfere.
Yep, it must happen this way. And I'm always pleasantly surprised when they throw a little twist. But sometimes it's like, you know, that the writer knew that people were going to guess the next line, so they just did a slightly different version of it just to mess with me. And I don't appreciate that. Like,
no, because I find it very satisfying. I really like, I talk about this all the time. I'm so obsessed with a symmetrical story. But like, and some people are like, oh, like, don't you think it's like boring to like be able to figure it out? I'm like, no, it's so satisfying. Like, when Shutter Island came out, I remember from the very beginning of that movie, I was like, okay, I know what's going on. You know, I had it in, you know, probably minutes. I was like, this is where we're going with this. But the ride was so phenomenal. And to be honest, if the setup is there and the payoff doesn't match that, I'm livid. I am livid. And I'm like, I hated it. I hated it. I hated it. And in reality, I don't hate it. It just really bothers me that there could have been symmetry and that there's not.
You know, that reminds me of, we do the workshop that we do every Thursday, and we have a writer who's sharing some like really awesome Sherlock stories. And so it brought on a conversation about what is the joy of Sherlock, and sort of this idea of what we really enjoy about Sherlock is seeing all the same evidence that Sherlock sees. And then we're trying to beat him in our heads. We're trying to make the connection of like, what does this clue mean for everything that we've just seen? And we want to either beat Sherlock or for Sherlock to see a takeaway that we immediately go, oh, I should have seen it. We don't want it to be like out of nowhere. We want it to feel of the piece and to be along the ride trying to piece it together. And I feel like being able to call what people are going to say and having that symmetry ties to a similar feeling, like the kind of engagement that's really fun with.
We've been trained for it almost, right?
Yeah.
Like as an audience. And I think that's really the key of like why some films do well and some don't. And some films are really great and the mainstream audience doesn't like it because it doesn't fit how they've been, you know, conditioned to enjoy a film. And that's okay. It's just one of those things that happens. That being said, on episode 4, I had a rough time with that, with Maisie Day. I don't know. I didn't connect to it. Like I think it had promise. I love the idea of like following a paparazzi. Like, wow, like what an interesting point of view that I don't think that I've really seen like that, but I struggled to connect with it. It didn't have that like intrigue for me.
I really wanted it to be a more personal situation. That was the problem for the celebrity. The quick version of this is that it's a celebrity, or it's a paparazzi named Bo, and we already understand that she's sort of amoral, not immoral, but like amoral. Like she'll take pictures of somebody. Right out the gate, she took a picture of some guy having an affair with a man, and the guy begged her not to do it and said like, you're gonna kill me. And then she sold it anyway, and he ended up committing suicide. She's kind of like, oops, you know,
I guess kind of my bad.
Kind of like she definitely feels bad about it, but not enough to stay out of the game when $30,000 is offered for another picture. She does need it, but you know. And then it's about kind of chasing this one celebrity girl who is going through it and trying to figure out like where she's hiding, and what the deal is with her. And we spend a lot of time with that celebrity, but the twist, I was like, are you serious? I forgot that it was mentioned. Yeah, exactly.
It didn't hit me. It didn't hit me. Like
it was like $30K if it's just her, $40K if you like catch her and she's like clearly in a bad spot. Like if she's clearly like looks like she's on drugs, then I'll give you more money. And I felt like it was going to have so much potential, and they find her in I'm going to spoiler again. They find her in a really bad situation. She's like chained up to a bed, and you're like, holy crap, what is going on? But then it's freaking a werewolf.
I know.
She's a werewolf. I was like, there's so many more interesting things you could do. They were like, this guy's. There was like, they set up this man that was helping her as like kind of a scary guy who was going to do like a sacrificial thing or something, and then he was just helping her because she's a werewolf. Like,
I know. I don't know if it's like because of the paranormal romance boom that just like really killed vampires and werewolves for me. Because I was so enmeshed in that world back in the day. So that like when I see something that's like, this is a werewolf or this is a vampire, I'm almost immediately like, oh no. Though I will say there is so American Horror Story, which I think has some similar ties to Black Mirror in that it's like anthology kind of season based. The Crimson Tide season, I don't know, they did two, like it was like two halves, like the season was 2 short seasons, which was interesting, but it's this writer family and they moved to this small town in like Cape Cod or whatever. And it turns out that like everybody there, all of the writers are vampires who like suck the blood out of everyone around them because it gives them special writing powers. And they can like be like the best writers in the entire world only if they're vampires. It was really funny. And I actually was like, you know, this is a vampire twist that I will, you know, enjoy. But it does take a lot for me to get there with those. And yeah, like werewolf, I'm like, oh man, like, and werewolf in a horror thing, if you cannot do better than Ginger Snaps, which to me is a modern masterpiece.
Yeah.
Don't even try.
Yeah. I I agree that I did not see the werewolf twist coming, but honestly, it was in a way that made me mad. Like, it was like the thing that you were just talking about, like, where I'm like, you have not set this up. Like, we have seen her struggling with, like, with drugs, and, like, that's why she's sweating, and we've seen, like, she's having, like, some trauma stuff, but now she's a freaking werewolf?
Right, like they had diazepam, like they could have at least had her like taking like monk's hood or something. Like maybe she's taking a weird supplement that stops the lycanthropy, but instead she's like, oh, I'm just gonna take some benzos. It didn't, the symmetry wasn't there. And like when you establish a show that is really reliant on symmetry and you don't follow that structure, it's hard as the audience to be like, oh, because you're promised something at the beginning of every single piece of art that you consume, and if that promise is not met, it's immediately unsatisfying.
I will say the only thing interesting about this was kind of the question to me was, what would it take for you as a paparazzi to decide that you're going to take a picture of someone who is committing suicide and sell it? And we took a paparazzi from someone who was allegedly somewhat cared about these things to the point where she's like, you know what? I'm going to sell this. Like,
Everyone has a number.
Yeah. We should put a trigger warning on this episode for the amount of time suicide is mentioned, but
we should use the term unaliving because I don't think that one gets triggered.
Oh, really? Yeah. Got it. Well, yeah, that was a big part of this, was kind of like, how far would it have to go? And for the answer to be, your subjects would be a werewolf who just killed an entire diner of people, I'm like, that's kind of a cop-out. You know, it's like, I would want the answer to be something that could more reasonably happen to people, or like with like one twist could happen to us all. But
to be a difficult choice, right? Like to have the question be, everybody has a number, what's yours? I feel like everybody's number for like, hey, well, you're going to take a picture of someone who just murdered a ton of other people in front of you. That's a lower number than like this, you know, here's an innocent person who's going through terrible traumatic things that maybe you've also experienced. Those are different numbers.
Yeah. Also, arguably, I believe she was more immoral with the first photograph she took.
I agree.
Than the last one.
Maybe it should have been in reverse. We should have started off with the werewolf.
Yeah, and then toned it down to a cool ruining a man's life by outing him in front of the entire world. Like, oh my god. But yeah, that was... So Theo, this is probably a you question. I see one from Sylvester that says, what's a good werewolf movie with good writing that you guys recommend watching?
The only good werewolf movie, not the only, but the seminal werewolf movie is Ginger Snaps. If you have not seen Ginger Snaps, it's phenomenal. It's about two teenage girls who are weirdos. They take photos of themselves fake dying, you know, in like horrific things. They're very like, it's us against the world. And then one of the girls starts going through puberty. And then also at the same time gets bit by a werewolf. So, and you don't know it's a werewolf at first, but you kind of guess. So it's this very parallel look at like puberty and women, but also werewolf, lycanthropy, that kind of thing. It is a hoot. Cool. It's phenomenal. I remember the first time seeing it and I was like, oh, is this going to be good? And I was like, oh, that was just...
I need to watch that now.
I haven't seen that. It's a great little movie. It's old. It was really indie, I think. Like, I don't remember it being super huge, but I remember renting it a lot from the movie store because I loved it.
I love me some indies. I will say that I don't think that this one counts, but I think it was the What We Do in the Shadows film. I know at least some episodes they obviously are about vampires, but then they have like rivalries with the werewolves, and it's definitely a comedy take on werewolves, but I really enjoyed that. That was some excellent writing, but it was a completely like parody mockumentary horror comedy vibe that all of the What We Do in the Shadows is. Fantastic writing. Still has werewolves. Technically counts.
Counts. I have not seen Dog Soldiers. I will check that out. I've been very wary on werewolves since the boom, I'll call it. And as soon as I see that something is about werewolves, I usually am like, ooh. Like I haven't even read
Twilight?
well, I mean, this is post.
Post Twilight.
This is post, because I was like 15 when Twilight came out, so of course that was part of my oof for a while. But like I haven't even read like A Court of Thorns and Roses or whatever it's called, like that big fantasy series, because I literally looked at the cover and I saw a wolf, and I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it anymore, guys.
Was it Magicians that has some werewolves in it? That
I think the Magicians had. They must have. They had so much stuff.
Well, because at least one of the actors in Magicians plays a werewolf in something else.
I think that one of them was a werewolf.
Is that what it is?
I think that they were. It's been a hot minute though.
I'll have to see what was his name. One of the actors in there I really, really love. He's like,
that was a fun show. I like that show.
It is. It is a really good. Magicians is like shockingly good. If you
Underworld's great. I will say, like, loved Underworld. It was very influential on me as a young'un.
Oh, there it is. The Order. That's what it was. So the actor's name is Adam DeMarco, and he was in the show called The Order, which I believe had more had like more werewolves in it, and it was definitely taken in a more serious way. I'll show his face.
Was it a spinoff of The Magicians?
No, it's just very similar in vibe. But it's this guy.
Okay.
How come everyone is named Adam? That's what I want to know.
I mean, it's, it was the first name.
The first, that, yeah. I guess you answered my question for me. But yeah, The Order was one, and it was really good, and it had some very cheesy moments, but definitely had some werewolves. So
I mean, I think there's room for me to one day enjoy werewolves and vampires again, but I definitely had a moment where I was like, nope, never again. Can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Cannot do it.
I'm seeing now that The Order is not ranked that high on IMDb, and I'm like, why? Were you watching what I was watching? Because I don't think you were.
So you didn't watch the last episode then? The demon of Black Mirror?
No, I did not. I need to, but I started.
It was interesting. I don't know how I felt about it overall. The premise of it was very interesting. It's like, first of all, it's made to look like a 70s like slasher flick, which was kind of cool. But it's kind of like this girl who like everybody treats her really terribly because she's like East Indian in London or England or wherever. And she dreams of like killing them. She has these like very like violent flashes in her mind. And then like an actual demon / angel. I couldn't really get a read on if it was, anyway, he shows up in the form of the dancing guy from freaking Rasputin by Boney M, which was a choice, and basically tells her like, listen, the end of the world is coming really soon and billions of people will die. The only way you can stop this, and you're the only one who can stop this, is if you sacrifice 3 people, but they can't be murderers or dogs.
Or dogs.
Well, I think he said the animals, like he's like, animals don't count. So basically he's like coaching her to try to like murder people to save the world. But there's this like interesting kind of like thing happening where she's also talking to like detectives about it like afterward, and they're like, oh, okay, so the guy from Boney M showed up and told you had to murder 3 people. And so it's kind of like funny like that. It was okay. I mean, it was slightly humorous. It didn't have the promise of Black Mirror, and I think that this happens every season, is just a couple episodes don't fit it, and I don't think it's possible. Exactly. I don't think one guy can realistically write an entire season of television, outside of Mike Flanagan, who, Haunting of Hill House, like he directed it. I don't remember if it was Hill House he directed every episode of, or if it was Midnight Mass, but I know he did at least one where he directed every episode. And afterward he said, I will never do that again. It nearly ruined my life. Because it's just not this kind of work. You just cannot solo like that. It's just not possible.
And also, like, why would you want? Kind of just my opinion on it is just, why would you want to? People have such amazing ideas. This is such a cool opportunity to pull together different takes and different voices. And like the stuff that's really good is things like episode 1, 2, and 3. or even just like the concept of 3. I will give that the concept of 3 is incredible. I will still object to the pacing, but I that's the kind of stuff we want, and it is, you're going to get that if you get other people involved. Like that's a lot to expect from one person to do that 6 times. I don't know. It's Theo, have you seen this one? This was a question about
Death Note.
Well, no. So Death Note, I started reading. Have you seen 2021 Werewolves Within?
No, I have not. I will take a look. I will take a look. I cannot promise I will watch it. I will give it my best. I have biases, I suppose, against supernatural creatures. And
when at first someone said supernatural, I was like, the supernatural, which I watched as long as I possibly could. I was a fan for as long as I possibly could, and I eventually had to give up on it, unfortunately.
I heard a gossip on TikTok where someone who really liked Supernatural named her children Sam and Dean. Except she was like into like fan fiction. Anyway, I
did see this one where Sam and Dean are kind of
that was a good piece of gossip. Yeah,
I did see that one. I saw that and I was like, my God, why would you do that? So I went all the way through like what season were they on? They were on like,
it was long. I haven't seen it all.
13 at least. I stuck around for all of it. I stuck around past when they were like, we're not doing this anymore. We're doing God. Here is God. Here is God's sister. Dean is an angel. Like I got all the way through that. I got to like the whole like we're gonna go in the weird dimension, and like this is your kid kinda. This guy's the devil's kid, and I got through a lot. And then I eventually reached the point where some episodes started and they started doing like this really like wild slow-mo and the fighting, and I was like, that was it for me. I will go through the angels, the devil, God, bring them all to me. I will do it. But the slow-mo fighting, I was like,
too much.
That makes me uncomfortable. I can't.
I think for something like that, I think it's a lesson in like if you're writing episodic television. This is something I think is really critical of right now. If you're writing episodic television and you want lots of seasons, don't throw all the good stuff in right away. Like if you jam pack all of the crazy stuff into your first season, things are going to go awry. This happened with Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. It got wild really early. Like season 2 and season 3 got super wild, and it got to a point where it was like, where do we go from here? Like where do you go from Sabrina Spellman has literally defeated Satan or whatever? How do you get past that? Like there is nowhere else to go unless you start inventing wild things. And
I agree. Yeah, I love the first Sabrina. The first
so good.
It was amazing, so and then it got a little off the rails. But
it went off the
rails. Me, it's like I think that
Riverdale too.
Yes, exactly. I watched the first bit of Riverdale, but then it was like I even got to the part where he was like in the prison and he was saying, "You've never experienced the epic highs and lows of high school football," or whatever it was.
That was a good line, though. They know what they're doing. You know, those writers, they know what they're doing. They're good writers.
They're great.
I will defend the writers of Riverdale.
But I remember too, though, that like Cole Sprouse, because remember he was like at NYU and he's like, I'm never gonna act again, and then he was in Riverdale, like just brooding.
Have you seen my hat? I'm weird. I'm a weirdo. But like the thing with Riverdale, and I love it. I haven't seen the latest season. We kind of fell off because the latest season gets really off the rails. Like they all have like these superpowers, and also for a while it wasn't Riverdale. It was like Rivervale. And we were in like an alternate dimension where like things were just slightly different for a bit. And now we're back into Riverdale, but like also Rivervale also exists at the same time. And they all have powers. And this guy showed up and he is going to, I don't know, there's like a train coming and they have to stop the train. Anyway, it's be the end of the world. And there's like angels. Anyway, it got really, really off the rails. And I think it's really a lesson to learn of like, hey, like think about, if you're going to be writing a TV show, is it 3 seasons? Is it 5 seasons? Do you have enough story for 5 seasons? Because if you do not, either you're going to have a very unsatisfying ending because your show's going to get canceled, or you know, you're just going to have to start coming up with stuff.
I think that for me, fortunately and mostly unfortunately, people are not getting a lot of shows for more than 3 seasons anymore.
No.
Like, it is very rare. Even if Netflix will like sign on and promise a new season, they're still canceling that. And I know that because like
it's happened.
So many of my favorite shows, Teenage Bounty Hunters, I really enjoyed Warrior Nun, Winona Earp, all of these, like, it tends to happen with like the shows that have really good queer representation, which is a whole other issue. But they will promise more and then cut it short more often.
The OA.
Not. Yeah.
That ruined
the OA. That was so good. Yeah. And it's one of those things where plan for, I think back in in Supernatural day, when people would actually like roll with a show for so many seasons, it was more like, okay, let's pace this. But now I think if you're going into writing a season of a show or like writing a pilot, I almost feel like you have to bank on only ever getting one chance to do this.
Yeah.
And
have an ending. Have an end, you know, because this is how I feel about it is if you don't get to tell the story that you want to tell, the contained story, then you might not ever get to tell it. You know, it's a rough landscape out there. I don't think there's an easy way to make sure that it happens beyond like a limited series. Like,
yeah,
in the adaptation of the novel that I just wrote that I was working on, it was something with the producer that I'm working with was very much, okay, well, people want, you know, at least 3 seasons outlined. And my idea was, I really think this needs to be a limited series for reasons that are very obvious for anyone who's read the book. Because if I write a 3-season structure, right? If I stretch this story out into 3 seasons, because this story has an ending, a very specific ending, if I get canceled after season 2, it will never be satisfying in that version of the story, and that's very difficult. And I don't know what the solution is to that.
It's a difficult spot to be in, because it's almost like my gut instinct is plan 1 season as strong as you can and then come up with things that the other 2 seasons could be, knowing full well Netflix wants to see them, but that they won't give them to you. It's like
have your ending in the first season.
Yeah. This is actually, so Theo, I'm really curious. Sylvester says, just an idea for your YouTube if you guys decide to do it. Can you talk about The Flash season 1 through 4 and why it was successful compared to the other seasons? Theo, are you a CW superhero watcher or not really?
I am a CW trash watcher. So I watch like the 100 and like
that's not trash.
Kind
that was
stuff.
Classy until close to the end. I was like
I never got into the superhero stuff, and I think it's because the way that I was watching the CW was very based on, at that time I had like a DVR and I was recording things, and that's how I would watch them. So it wasn't as much that. So I have not watched The Flash, and I probably
Did you watch
should.
Supergirl?
No. I'm not much into superheroes. I'm not gonna lie. Like I don't even like Avengers.
I watched
Spider-Man.
What was the other one? There was like not I always call it League of Legends, but it's not. It's like the Legends of Tomorrow or something. There's like a lot of.
There's so many shows.
I really enjoyed them for a long time, but they're all exactly what Sylvester here says. It's like the first 4 seasons are just like, yes, do it. And then they just start fizzling and they have to go into the multiverse. And then you're like,
right.
Yeah, as they inevitably do. Yeah, but
was The Flash, would that have been a writer strike thing? Because I remember Heroes, the first season of Heroes was like bang on, man. Like that was a really great show. I loved that show. And as someone who's like not super into like superheroes or superpowers, like I thought Heroes was really compelling. And then the 2008 writer strike just killed it. So I wonder, I don't know, I should check it out. I will try to watch it and see if I can find it.
I'm seeing that The Flash started in 2014.
Okay, so wouldn't have been affected by any of that. I know that a lot of shows kind of got their legs, I don't know. I can't think of the analogy I'm trying to think of right now.
I would be down to do some CW trash.
I love it. Yeah, I loved the 100. The 100 was like,
oh, that was my jam. I would truly be down for it, Sylvester. I watched the 100 was the shiz. They fell into the kill your gays trope. I guess they've apologized.
Well,
It will
Alexa
never
had to
undo
die,
it.
though. Alexa had
Not
to
like
die.
that. Not like that. That is my stance. I'm like, why would you kill her in the most useless way ever? Don't do that to me. It was so pointless. No, give her a good death if you have to kill her. Like, I got why we kind of narratively needed her to be alone.
Yeah, narratively, we needed that to happen.
But at the same time, it's like, respect this character enough to not just make it a oopsies. Like, come on. Like,
yeah. Octavia was my girl. I was like,
yeah,
I was
the
here
girl
for
on the
her.
floor eating everyone. I was like,
That
my
was a great
God.
moment. I was like, oof, we're here. You know what I love
Yeah.
about the CW though is that they just go for it. You know, they're like,
They know
let's
who
do
they
it.
are.
They know who
what
they
they
are.
do.
That's the thing about Riverdale. They know what they're doing. They're very good at doing it. It's funny. It's campy. The thing about Riverdale that I think that like people who don't watch Riverdale don't understand is that it's a very self-aware show. And
Yeah.
half of it is making fun of itself. Like every season has at least one musical theater episode where like they sing the entire episode.
They do that in Supergirl. They do that in The Flash, because all of them can freaking sing.
They can all sing. They're all singers. Yeah.
It's the thing that you have to be the triple threat to get into.
Exactly.
And all of them are just amazing singers.
But it's an important lesson, I think, of like, if you're going to be writing in a space that is not like just like the spec feature market, it's television, like you've got to really know your audience and what they want. Like it's like romance, right? If you're in the romance writing sphere, you need to know what your readers expect, because if you write a romance novel made for romance readers and you do not have a happily ever after, HEA, woo, they're not going to like you, you know? And so like, as much as, you know, we have to write to our own instincts, and definitely like our first, you know, things have to be that way. There are going to be some times where we have to write for the audience that wants to enjoy it, right? Like, what's the point of writing something that people don't enjoy?
Yeah, I agree. And it's sort of like the CW really needs to learn to go ahead and embrace the people who are actually watching their stuff. That's like probably one of the biggest critiques I have, is that like with Supergirl, everyone was like, Lena and Kara have to get together. That's what the audience wants. And then there's like this whole like resistance of like, no, that's not what I, the writer, wanted. And it's a delicate balance of like, you have to know who you're writing for. You have to be true to your own vision. You have to respect both. Like, you got to respect your audience. That was a huge thing with a lot of CW shows. And like the criticism of the 100, of the way that Supergirl handled shutting down those thoughts. I could rant about this for a long time. But so maybe we will do a CW trash. Maybe we'll do that, Theo. But I think that I could talk about this all day, but I think that now we have to hop off. But thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. Please let us know if there's anything you want us to do. I think me and Theo are going to try to find a way to talk about CW stuff soon.
We will do it. We will find a way.
Yes. All right. See you, everybody.
Have a great weekend.